It was a Tuesday, just after recess, the kind of day that smelled faintly of pencil shavings and too much hand sanitizer. Ms. Ellison had barely gotten through roll call when she clapped her hands and said, "All right, time for our What My Parent Does presentations." One by one, kids stood up in front of the class. A firefighter dad, a bakery mom, even a brother in the Marines got a round of applause, even though he technically didn't count. Then it was Ava Morgan's turn. She stood slowly, holding a small index card with her name written in blue gel pen. Ava was one of the quieter kids in class, smart, observant, but not the type who raised her hand just to hear herself talk. She didn't lock eyes with anyone, didn't need to. She just stood straight, voice clear. "My mom works at NASA." Silence, then a chuckle, then another, the kind that rolls through a room like a slow wave, growing louder as each kid picked it up like a contagious thought. "Wait, NASA? You mean the space people?" Someone blurted from the back. "She's lying," another voice whispered, not nearly quiet enough. Even Ms. Ellison's expression shifted. She didn't laugh, but her eyebrows lifted, just a little, as if even she wasn't sure what to believe. Ava didn't flinch, didn't run. She just stood there, calm face, steady hands. "Yes," she said again, "she's a systems engineer." The words hung in the air like they didn't belong. A quiet moment stretched long. Miss Ellison finally stepped in, her smile tight. "Well, thank you, Ava," she said quickly, already scanning the list. "Next up, we have Jaden." Ava sat down, ignoring the snickers, the sideways glances. Her fingers curled around the hem of her hoodie. Her face didn't change, but her ears were warm. Her stomach felt tight. Jaden launched into a story about how his dad ran a plumbing business, but Ava barely heard a word. She knew what they were thinking. They didn't believe her. Not one of them. Maybe not even the teacher. And it wasn't just the job that sounded impossible to them. It was her. A girl with dark skin and soft braids pulled back with a faded lavender scrunchie, a second-hand backpack with a torn zipper. Her sneakers weren't new. Her words weren't flashy. Her voice wasn't loud. So to them, saying NASA sounded like playing make-believe. Someone passed a folded note to her desk. A boy named Griffin leaned over and muttered, "Does she clean the bathrooms there or something?" Ava didn't answer. She didn't cry either. Not then. But when the bell rang and backpacks flew onto shoulders like parachutes, she didn't move. She just sat there, eyes fixed on the classroom door. For the first time, she wished her mom had a simpler job, something easier to explain, something people didn't laugh at. But even as that thought passed, she never once wished her mom didn't do what she did. Not really. Her mom had told her once, "Some truths are too big for small minds. You just have to let them catch up." Ava walked out with her chin up, even though her chest still felt tight. She wasn't embarrassed for herself. She was embarrassed for them. But what she didn't know, not yet anyway, was that the lesson wasn't over. Not for her classmates, and definitely not for Miss Ellison. Honestly, if this part made you feel anything, hit that like button, drop a comment, and share it forward. Let's make it ripple. The Morgan house sat at the edge of a quiet street just south of downtown Huntsville, Alabama. It wasn't big, but it was always tidy. Pale green siding, a front porch with two mismatched rocking chairs, and a screen door that creaked every time you opened it, like the house itself had something to say. Ava stepped inside slower than usual. She didn't kick her shoes off like she normally did. She peeled them off like something heavy was weighing her down. Her backpack landed near the stairs with a soft thud. No bounce, no rush, just still. The scent of garlic and sautéed onions pulled her toward the kitchen. Her mom, Dr. Naomi Morgan, stood at the stove, stirring something inside a big red pot. She was still in her work clothes, dark slacks, fitted blouse, no makeup, hair pulled into a neat bun. Her lanyard, the one with the NASA Johnson Space Center badge, sat on the counter beside a set of blueprints. "You're late," she said without turning, not stern, just observant. Ava pulled out a chair and dropped into it. "Had to wipe desks," she mumbled, eyes on the floor. Naomi turned then, took one look at her daughter's face, and lowered the burner without a word. She sat down across from her, elbows on the table, waiting. Ava's hands twisted the sleeves of her hoodie. Her fingers couldn't stay still. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked like she wanted to talk but hadn't found the door to walk through yet. They laughed, she said finally. Naomi didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Ava kept her eyes on the table. I told them you work at NASA. Her mother nodded, slow, thoughtful. And they didn't believe you. Nope. One kid said maybe you clean the bathrooms. Naomi let out a quiet breath. Not quite a sigh, more like a pause, a moment to keep her voice steady. What did you say back? She asked. Nothing. Ms. Ellison moved on fast, like it was easier that way. Naomi's expression tightened just slightly, but her voice stayed calm. Do you think you did something wrong? Ava looked up for the first time. No. Then don't carry their ignorance like it's yours to fix. Ava blinked. Her shoulders dropped just a little, but her face still held something, something small and wounded. They laughed. And that's on them, Naomi said. Not on you. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, a dog barked once, then quieted. The pot on the stove let out a slow, bubbling sound, like it was trying to fill the quiet for them. When I told my high school counselor I wanted to work in aerospace, Naomi said, she told me to be more realistic, said I should think about clerical work. Ava's head snapped up. You're kidding. Nope, that was 96. I didn't argue. I just stopped going to her office. Did it hurt? Naomi smiled without showing teeth. Yeah, but it also lit something in me. I wasn't mad at her. I just decided she wasn't going to decide who I got to be. Ava's mouth twitched upward, just barely. Naomi stood and walked back to the stove, stirring the stew again, slow and easy. Then over her shoulder she added, Parent Day is this Friday, right? Ava blinked. Yeah. I was thinking about coming. Her daughter's eyes widened. You'd do that? I already took the day off. Figured it might be fun. Ava stared at her, like she was trying to imagine it. Her mother, blazer sharp, badge swinging, stepping into that classroom like a silent storm. What would you even wear? She asked. Naomi grinned. I was thinking that black blazer you hate. Maybe the badge. Definitely the badge. Ava laughed then, a real laugh. Not polite, not forced. One that came from somewhere behind the ribs. Okay, yeah, do that. Thought so. They sat down to eat together, 2 bowls of thick stew between them. Naomi told stories about her first NASA interview, the time she spilled coffee on a simulator keyboard, the boss who couldn't pronounce her name right for 6 months. Ava listened, spoon halfway to her mouth, eyes wide, the weight slowly peeling off her shoulders. You don't owe anyone proof, Naomi said gently, spoon resting on the edge of her bowl. But if you ever feel like showing them, just know I've got your back. Ava nodded, her cheeks full of food. And your badge, she added, grinning. Naomi smiled. That too. But she wasn't showing up just to prove anything. She was showing up to shift the room. Ava just didn't know it yet. Friday came faster than Ava expected. The week moved in strange waves. Some kids offered half-hearted apologies. One gave her a crumpled pack of fruit snacks. Another muttered something about, just kidding. But most of them said nothing, and honestly, that was fine. She hadn't told anyone her mom was coming. By the time the morning bell rang, the classroom buzzed with restless excitement. Ms. Ellison had rearranged the desks into a horseshoe and set out a tray of grocery store sugar cookies on a flimsy plastic table. She wore a deep purple blouse, probably chosen just for the occasion, and kept smoothing the hem every few minutes like the event needed to feel a little more polished than it was. Ava sat near the middle. Her backpack was tucked neatly beneath her chair. Her hands were still, but her thoughts raced. She wasn't scared, just waiting. That kind of still before the storm feeling. The first parents trickled in around 9:15. A man in a mechanic's jumpsuit, a woman in scrubs, a few moms holding iced coffee cups and oversized tote bags. They smiled big and waved hard, like they were used to being the loudest people in the room. The presentation started, polite clapping, light laughter. One dad told a story about a busted water heater that flooded their basement. A mom showed pictures of her yoga studio and explained how she once taught toddlers downward dog. Ava kept glancing at the door. Then, just as Ms. Ellison was introducing the next speaker, the door opened, and Dr. Naomi Morgan stepped inside. The room went still. She wore the black blazer Ava hated, the one with the sharp shoulders and the folded lapel. Black slacks, polished flats. Around her neck hung a navy blue lanyard, the kind with white letters that spelled out NASA, all caps. Her badge sat just below her collarbone, catching the light as she walked in. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't smiling too big or trying to look important. She was just present, calm, unapologetic. Miss Ellison hesitated. And this is... Ava stood before she could finish. This is my mom, Dr. Naomi Morgan. The teacher blinked, then smiled too quickly. Right. Welcome. Would you like to share something about your work? Naomi nodded once. Sure. Good morning, everyone. She stepped forward, her voice smooth but steady. I'm an aerospace systems engineer at NASA. I work on flight systems integration, mission planning, and operational strategy for upcoming lunar and Mars expeditions. A few heads turned. One boy's mouth actually dropped open. Naomi continued, her tone measured but firm. That means I help design how astronauts travel through space, how they breathe, how they communicate, how they survive the trip and return safely. She paused just long enough to let it sink in. But I didn't come here to impress you, she added, her eyes scanning the room. I came because my daughter told me she shared what I do, and some of you didn't believe her. The silence that followed was full and thick. Ava could feel her heart pounding, but she didn't move, didn't blink. Naomi stepped to the whiteboard and held up a laminated schematic, a real one, from an actual NASA project. A flow diagram with boxes, arrows, labels that looked like a foreign language to most of the room. You don't need to understand all of this. That's okay. But the next time someone tells you something that sounds too big to believe, take a second before you laugh. Because brilliance doesn't always show up in the package you expect. She turned, her eyes landing gently on Ava. And when someone tells the truth with pride, don't shrink it. Let it stand. Ms. Ellison cleared her throat, voice a little higher than usual. Thank you, Doctor. Morgan, that was very enlightening. Naomi gave a polite smile and walked over to sit beside Ava, who was trying very hard not to grin like her face might split. The room moved slower after that. The next parent, someone's stepdad who ran a car dealership, fumbled through his note cards, suddenly aware that the bar had shifted. And Ava, she sat taller than she ever had before. She didn't glance around to see who was watching. She already knew they were. Before she was Dr. Naomi Morgan, she was just Naomi Johnson, a tall, lanky girl from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with oversized glasses and notebooks full of diagrams no one else cared about. She grew up in a small house with peeling green paint and a porch that sagged slightly on one side. Her mother worked 2 jobs, day shift at a clinic, night shift cleaning offices. There was always a fan running in the living room, even in winter, to cover the sound of sirens or loud arguments from down the block. Naomi knew early on that she didn't quite fit the mold. While other girls were practicing dance routines or playing double dutch, she was in the corner unscrewing a broken remote to see how it worked. Her favorite place wasn't the mall or the park, it was the library. At 13, she found a book about space shuttles in the science section, checked it out, read it cover to cover that night. By 14, she was teaching herself how to code. Nothing fancy, just little text-based games on the school's clunky desktop computers. She didn't talk about it much at school. She had learned early that saying, "I want to work at NASA," made people squint at her like she was telling a joke that didn't land. Her teachers didn't push her, not because she wasn't smart. She had straight A's in every class, but because they had already decided what she was likely to become. "You're so organized," one counselor said. "You'd make a great receptionist." She smiled politely, then went home and applied to a summer engineering program at Georgia Tech. When she told her math teacher about it, he raised his eyebrows and said, "That's pretty competitive. You sure you want to waste the application fee?" She applied anyway. She got in. That summer changed everything. For the first time, she was around other kids who thought the way she did. Kids who didn't roll their eyes when she talked about orbit transfers or microgravity. She came home with a folder full of blueprints and a fire she hadn't known was waiting to be lit. But college was a mountain all its own. At Auburn, Naomi was one of only 3 black women in the entire engineering department. In every group project, she was the one asked to take notes. Her name was mispronounced constantly, even after 3 semesters. She didn't complain. She just kept showing up. She worked nights at a Waffle House off campus and tutored high schoolers on Saturdays. There were moments she considered quitting, not because she couldn't handle the work, but because she was tired of fighting to be seen. One spring, after scoring the highest grade on a brutal thermodynamics midterm, she overheard 2 classmates whispering, "She must have had help. Probably copied from someone." Naomi didn't confront them. She didn't cry. She went home, opened her textbook, and started prepping for finals. When the semester ended, she ranked first in her department. No one said anything, but they saw it, and that was enough. After graduation, she landed an internship at Lockheed Martin. Then came the application to NASA. She almost didn't send it in. Thought it was too far, too much, too soon. She got the call in March. She was sitting in a laundromat with a basket of damp towels and one working dryer. Her mother cried on the phone for 5 straight minutes. No words, just joy in its rawest form. And that was just the beginning. The real work came later. The late-night meetings, the design reviews, the times she had to repeat herself 3 times just to be heard, the men who assumed she was the assistant, the quiet meetings where people nodded politely but didn't write her name down. She never yelled, never demanded attention, but she never let anyone ignore her either, because every time she sat at a console or stood in front of a whiteboard, she thought about that 13-year-old version of herself, alone in the library, reading about space shuttles, just needing one person to believe it was possible. She became that person, not just for herself, but for her daughter and for every kid who's ever been told to dream smaller. So when she stepped into Ava's classroom that Friday, with that badge clipped to her chest and a schematic in her hand, she wasn't trying to prove anything. She was planting something, something strong, something that couldn't be laughed away. The following Monday came with no fanfare, no fireworks, no confetti, just the usual sound of sneakers on tile, backpacks thudding against desks, and the low hum of kids trying not to fall asleep during announcements. But something was different, not loud, just quieter. When Ava walked into the room, no one pointed, no one whispered, no one laughed. Griffin didn't make another bathroom joke. In fact, he didn't even look her way. He spent most of the morning chewing his pencil and staring at the corner of his desk like it had answers he couldn't find. Ms. Ellison gave her a nod at the door. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt intentional. Ava didn't smile back, but she noticed. At recess, 2 girls, Maya and Elena, wandered over to where Ava usually sat near the jungle gym. Neither said anything at first, just stood around, shifting their weight, trying not to seem like they were trying. "My mom said your mom's speech was really something," Maya said finally, chewing on the edge of her sleeve. "She sounded smart, like really smart." "She is," Ava replied, no hesitation. Elena nodded. "I looked up NASA stuff this weekend. I didn't know they're trying to go back to the moon." "They are," Ava said. "It's called the Artemis program." That was all they said, but they didn't walk away. They stayed. And for the first time all year, the 3 of them sat together on the low metal bench and talked. Not about slime or who traded what snack, but about stars and orbits and what it would feel like to leave Earth. Later that day, as the class packed up for dismissal, Ms. Ellison gently pulled Ava aside. "I wanted to say something," she began, voice lower than usual, "about last week." Ava looked up, guarded. "I should have handled that moment differently," the teacher said. "I should have asked more questions. I shouldn't have moved on so quickly. I'm sorry." Ava blinked. She wasn't used to adults apologizing like that, not when it mattered. She nodded once. That was enough. For now. But not everyone changed overnight. Some kids still whispered, but they did it quieter now, careful like they were trying not to get caught in their own doubt. A few glanced at Ava like they were waiting for her to mess up, like they needed her to shrink so they could feel normal again. There was one boy, Dean, who started calling her Space Girl under his breath every time she walked by, like he was trying to chip away at something she had earned. But Ava didn't flinch, didn't shrink. She just kept doing her work, She asked more questions in class now. She raised her hand even when she wasn't completely sure. She tried, out loud, because getting something wrong didn't scare her anymore. Not like it used to. One afternoon during a group project, she overheard a girl mutter, "She thinks she's better than us." Ava didn't roll her eyes, didn't snap back. She looked up, calm. "No," she said. "I just know I belong here." There was no comeback after that. At home, Naomi noticed the shift too. Ava talked more at dinner. Not big things, just little details. Who got in trouble? What the lunch line served? Whether Miss Ellison was still pretending those cookies were homemade. It was more than Naomi used to get, and that was enough. She noticed something else too. Ava started drawing again. Not cartoons, not fashion sketches like last year, but diagrams, satellites, rocket parts, space helmets, solar panels, all in pencil, with notes in the margins that only she could decipher. One night, Naomi found a sticky note on the fridge. It said, "I'm going to work there too. Love, Ava." She didn't move it, not for 3 days. And while Ava didn't say it out loud, something had shifted, not just in how she walked through the school halls, but in how she saw herself. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about building something that couldn't be laughed away. By the end of the week, Ava had stopped looking over her shoulder. She no longer scanned the classroom to see who was watching. She didn't brace herself before speaking or second-guess every sentence. That part of her had gone quiet. Not because the world around her had suddenly become kinder, but because something inside her had grown louder. At home, the kitchen table had become her new headquarters. Most afternoons, right after she tossed her backpack in the corner, she'd sit down with a pencil, a ruler, and a sheet of graph paper. No TV, no music. Just that steady scratching sound of ideas becoming shapes. She was working on something new. Not just doodles, not guesses, designs. One evening, Naomi walked into the kitchen to find Ava hunched over a drawing, her forehead creased in concentration, tongue tucked lightly against the corner of her upper lip. "You want to take a break?" Naomi asked, drying her hands with a dish towel. "Almost done," Ava mumbled, still sketching. Naomi smiled and leaned against the counter. "You've been working on that for 2 hours." "I know," Ava said, finally lifting her pencil. "I just want it to look right." She turned the paper around and slid it across the table. Naomi walked over and took a look. It was a satellite, a concept sketch, complete with folding solar panels, directional thrusters, and handwritten notes about orientation and energy storage. But there was something different about it. Instead of flat panels, the design had petal-like shapes, meant to open and turn like a flower toward the sun. "Explain it to me," Naomi said, sitting beside her. "Well," Ava began, pointing to the corners, "it's a satellite, but instead of keeping all the panels flat, they open like this." She mimicked the motion with her hands. "So they can move with the sun's position, kind of like a sunflower." Naomi studied the drawing. "That's smart," she said. "Where'd you get the idea?" "I don't know. I saw a picture of a sunflower and just started thinking about how it always turns to find the light." Naomi tapped the corner of the page, thoughtful. "You know what I love most about this idea?" "What?" "You weren't trying to impress anybody. You were just trying to solve a problem." Ava looked down at the drawing again, her fingers resting gently along the edge. "Yeah," she said softly. "I guess I was." They sat there for a moment in that kind of silence that doesn't need fixing. Then Ava spoke again. "Do you think they really believed me? After you left the classroom?" Naomi rested her hand on the table. "Some did. Some still don't. That's not something you can always control." "So, what do I do?" Naomi's voice was calm, solid. "You keep showing up. That's the hard part. Not just once, but over and over again. You speak the truth, even when it feels like no one's listening." Ava thought about that for a long second. "Like you did." Naomi gave a small smile. "Like I still do." Ava looked at her mother differently then, not just as the person who made dinner and drove carpool and reminded her to take her allergy meds, but as someone who had walked through more closed doors than she could count and never stopped knocking. "I used to wish you had a normal job," Ava admitted. Naomi laughed, the sound low and familiar. "Oh, I know. I could see it all over your face when people asked what I did." Ava grinned. I just didn't know how to explain it. And now I think it's cool. Like really cool. Naomi leaned forward and gently tucked one of Ava's braids behind her ear. I'm proud of you, she said. Not because of what you said in class, but because you said it anyway. Ava felt a warmth bloom in her chest. It wasn't just pride. It was something deeper, like relief, like laying down a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. I didn't think you were going to come that day, she said quietly. Why not? I thought maybe you'd think it wasn't worth it. Naomi shook her head. Anything that messes with how you see yourself, that's always worth showing up for. They didn't say much after that. Ava stood, walked to the fridge, and grabbed a magnet. Then she pinned her drawing right beside the grocery list. Naomi watched her, heart full, voice quiet. Not every moment came with applause. Some just sat there, waiting to be earned. The next week, during morning announcements, something unexpected happened. Ms. Ellison stood at the front of the room, holding a slip of paper in her hand. Her tone was steady, but there was a flicker of something behind her voice, something that hadn't been there before. This one's from Ava Morgan, she said, from our Career Dreams board. She looked up, not at anyone in particular, but the pause felt intentional. She wrote, I want to build machines that go to places no person has ever been, because someone has to figure out how to get us there. And I think I can. The classroom was quiet, not the awkward kind of silence, but the kind that fills a room when everyone knows they've just heard something that matters. A few students turned to glance at Ava, not with disbelief this time, with something closer to respect. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She just kept her eyes on her notebook, quietly sketching small gears in the margins. Focused, calm, still. She wasn't looking for a cheer. That had never been the point. Because this story wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about what happens when someone believes you out loud. What it feels like when the people around you finally stop seeing your truth as a punchline and start recognizing it as a possibility. Ava didn't need to convince the class anymore. She had moved on from that. Now she was focused on what she believed possible, and that changed everything. What most of the kids in that classroom didn't realize was that the woman who'd walked in with the badge and the blazer hadn't always been heard either. Naomi had spent her entire life pressing through silence, walking into rooms where people expected less of her and still delivering more than they could imagine. She never raised her voice, never demanded respect. She just showed up, fully, unapologetically, and that was enough. But the weight of that moment, what happened in that fifth grade classroom, wasn't hers to carry alone. It was Ava's now, and Ava carried it well. She had stood in the fire of ridicule, walked through it, and come out stronger on the other side. Not louder, not harder, just more certain of who she was. And sometimes that's the bravest kind of power there is. Because believing in yourself out loud, especially when no one else claps, is one of the hardest things a person can do. This wasn't just about what job someone's parent had. It was about what we teach our kids, not with speeches or slogans, but with action. When you believe in your child, even quietly, you give them armor. When you show up for them, especially when it's uncomfortable, you give them courage. And when you stand beside them, even for just 5 minutes in a crowded classroom, you teach them what being seen actually feels like. That kind of support, it sticks. It changes the way a kid walks into a room. They stop shrinking. They stop apologizing. They start acting like their voice matters, because now they know it does. At the end of the school year, every student in Miss Ellison's class got a page in the memory book, a little square with their photo, and a line underneath that read, most likely to, under Ava Morgan's picture, someone had written, most likely to launch something into space. She saw it on the last day, tucked between backpacks and goodbye cards and the smell of dry erase markers. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She smiled. Not because it sounded cool, but because this time, they actually meant it. And maybe, just maybe, they'd started to understand what brilliance really looks like.